In the dangerous world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, few names command as much fear and respect as Dayne Brajkovich. Standing 6 feet 2 inches, 220 pounds of raw muscle with 80% of his body covered in ink, including Hells Angels branded across his forehead.
"I'm not the toughest I just always get up," is how he describes his life philosophy.
By age 26, he'd climbed to sergeant-at-arms in a global organization. A man who wears $319,000 in gold on his body like armor, including 8 16-carat rings he calls his legal knuckle dusters. But in January 2022, it all came crashing down, expelled from the club he'd given everything to.
The story's in Tuesday's West. The rumour is the gang expelled Dayne because he didn't want them associating with other clubs. Word is Dayne got the shits with Hells Angels members hanging out with other clubs at parties and whatnot. There was a poolside gathering with rebels at Scarborough. The cops broke that one up, didn't like cats being on show. Being a teetotaler, maybe Dayne was pissed he wasn't invited.
11 months later, at a concert with 10,000 witnesses, a blade sliced through his throat, missing his jugular by millimeters. 5 arrests followed, multiple raids. Yet the real story, that's just the beginning. This is a tale of power, betrayal, and survival, where a single wrong move can cost you everything, or your life. This is the story of a man who had it all, lost it all, and lived to tell about it. The streets of Perth have their own legends. Dark tales whispered in smoky bars, stories that make grown men nervous. And then there's Dayne Brajkovich. Born in 1979, young Dayne cut his teeth in Belmont's tough streets. It wasn't an easy life. The relationship with his old man? Toxic. School at Ursula Frayne Catholic College? That didn't last long.
A lot of that life is straight out of the bikie playbook. Grows up in a tough area, which Belmont certainly was back in the 80s when Dayne was a kid. Problematic relationship with his father, he hates him. Gets kicked out of school, that was Ursula Frayne Catholic College in East Vic Park. Falls in with the wrong crowd. In Dayne's case, that was a bloke called Tristan Albury, one of Australia's great psychopaths.
But the streets, they taught him well. You see, some men are born to follow the straight and narrow. Others, they're drawn to the roar of engines, the glint of chrome, and the promise of brotherhood. Dayne was the latter. Standing 6 feet 2 inches and weighing in at 220 pounds of solid muscle, he had the physical presence that demanded respect. But it was more than that, way more. Dayne was a decent Muay Thai fighter, but the streets were way better.
He talked down his Muay Thai career, but people who follow the sport say he was a genuinely good fighter, a proper athlete. Dayne says he was always better on the street than in the ring.
By his early 20s, Dayne had caught the attention of the Hells Angels. Not just any motorcycle club, mind you. We're talking about the biggest, baddest outlaw motorcycle club in the world. The elite of the elite. Getting in? That's a story in itself. The Angels don't just hand out patches to anyone with a bike and an attitude. You gotta prove yourself, show your worth, demonstrate unwavering loyalty. And brother, did Dayne prove himself? He rocketed through the ranks like a meteor. By 2005, at just 26 years old, he'd achieved what most bikers only dream about. Sergeant-at-arms of the Perth chapter. The enforcer, the muscle, the guy who made sure everyone stayed in line. But power? It's a double-edged sword, and Dayne was about to learn just how sharp those edges could be. Power in the bikie world? It's like holding on to a live wire. In 2021, he had a drive-by shooting in his home. His buddy Aubrey was there.
Apparently Tristan broke his nose in a fight at Belmont High in Year 12, but then avenged Brajkovich's honour by bashing the bloke who shot up Dayne's house in a drive-by in 2021.
And by January 2022, Dayne's grip was starting to slip. The trouble started brewing when some Angels began mixing with rival clubs. At parties, social gatherings, even a poolside bash with the rebel Nick Martin at Scarborough that the cops had to break up. For a hardliner like Dayne, this was crossing a line, a big one.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
You see, loyalty meant everything to him. It wasn't just about wearing the colors, it was about living them. And when he saw his brothers getting cozy with rivals, well, let's just say it didn't sit right. Not right at all. The situation came to a head at the clubhouse. Words were exchanged, threats made, then it got physical. Real physical. Dayne, the feared enforcer, squared off against the Perth chapter president. The result? Explosive. Here's the thing about the Angels. They don't take kindly to members challenging leadership. Doesn't matter if you're right, doesn't matter if you're wrong. Cross that line and there's hell to pay. The verdict came down hard and fast. Dayne Brajkovich, the man who'd given everything to the club, was out. Expelled.
Someone's got a tattoo problem.
Dayne Brajkovich, bikie enforcer, Muay Thai champion, basketball fan, Shields jewellery enthusiast, current affairs thought leader, and fashion tragic. Has been kicked out of the Hells Angels outlaw motorcycle gang.
Cast out into the cold. But this wasn't just about losing a patch. In the outlaw world, yesterday's brother becomes tomorrow's enemy. And Dayne? He'd just made some very dangerous enemies indeed. Some men hide from the spotlight. Dayne Brajkovich? He turns every moment into theater. His body tells the story. 80% covered in ink. Hells Angels across the forehead. 1%er on his neck.
Dayne Brajkovich back in court again with a conspicuous band-aid. Another hearing about whether he breached the insignia laws that ban bikies from displaying gang tats and colours and anything to do with bikie culture. You'd think that was an open and shut case. Before he blacked out his tattoos, Dayne had the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club acronym on his face, Sergeant at Arms on his head, and 1% on his neck.
His postcode etched into his skin. A walking billboard of defiance.
He's got his postcode tattooed on his face, which means he's limited to buying in Ascot, Belmont or Redcliffe.
He could change it to 6704.
What's that?
A little spot in the Netherlands.
That's perfect. Dutch court banned the Hells Angels.
7 court appearances. 7 chances to show respect. Instead, pure rebellion.
He's without a doubt one of Perth's most recognisable bikies, but Dayne Brajkovich claims this is a case of mistaken identity. The latest to stand trial fighting anti-insignia charges, the former Hells Angel denying he publicly flaunted a club T-shirt in Ascot in January and 2 gang tattoos at Belmont Forum a week later. How do you think it went in there today? Both incidents allegedly witnessed by police and caught on camera, but the dumped enforcer claims he wouldn't be seen dead in club colours, telling a magistrate he'd already been expelled over the phone for bashing the president, tossing his clothes in a good Sammy's bin when no one came to collect them. Are you still upset about the way you were dumped from the club?
April 2022 said it all. Strutting in, wearing a Gucci cap, designer shades, and Hells Angels MC jersey. A $216,000 chain around his neck. A $103,000 bracelet on his wrist. 8 16-carat gold rings he called his legal knuckle dusters. The insignia charges seemed solid. His celebration? Pure Dayne. No wild parties.
3 weeks ago, he had a big win in court beating the charges that he displayed gang insignia in public. And a few people, including me, wondered how a former bikie enforcer celebrates such an occasion. Does he go hard partying outlaw, or does the guy who told a judge, "I take steroids and go to the gym," follow the Rock's advice?
Just Perth's most feared enforcer at Adventure World, riding the slowest tractor with a kid-like grin.
When Dayne wants to get crazy, there's only one place to go.
We're gonna fly, we're gonna spin, sun's gonna shine, we're going in.
This is WA's most ferocious-looking underworld figure enjoying himself on Sunday afternoon at Perth's most ferociously bogan fun park.
We're gonna have an awesome day.
Have a look at the smile on this guy's face. He's still got the grin from when he beat the rap in mid-January. Who says he skips leg day? Look at those quads go.
Seems an odd place for him to go.
What are you talking about? Adventure World's been the place to celebrate life's big moments ever since it opened.
Adventure World. It's been built for everyone who is a kid at heart.
Who doesn't want to go to a place where a dude with a pedotash directs children onto the world's slowest track?
Behind the show, a $1.2 million Ascot sanctuary and Jacinta, his wife since 2015. The quiet anchor to his public storm. You can take Dayne to court, but you can't take away his style or his defiance. The Mongols were watching, they all were. 5 months after his explosive exit from the Angels, Dayne appeared wearing Raiders gear, the feeder club for the Mongols Motorcycle Club.
This guy has weaponized fashion. 5 months after he wore that "you can keep your silver t-shirt" after Four Corners broadcast footage of him at the Perth Mint, 2 months after he raised the profile of Aboriginal rights, and 6 weeks after signalling his support for the queer community, he's been pictured in Raiders gear. And it's not because he's into American football. At this stage, we're reliably told it's not happening. Dayne's just stirring the pot. Just a shout out to Troy and the Mongols, keep punching, support black and white, is what he said outside court.
A calculated move that set Perth's underworld buzzing.
The Raiders are a feeder group for the Mongols outlaw motorcycle gang. So every bikie, gangster, lawyer and gang crime cop in Australia is wondering whether a former enforcer with the Hells Angels is thinking about patching over to a new club.
For a man with Hells Angels still tattooed across his forehead, it was like lighting a match in a powder keg.
Dayne gives 1% of the he should give about being the target of any retribution.
It's not the first time he's chipped the club.
He's been laying out the reasons he believed his former gang buddies were weak.
He said,
First for complaining he was too violent, second for expelling him by phone, and finally for not collecting his patch despite him waiting 2 days for the knock on the door.
He's certainly poking the bear.
With his dick, while high-fiving himself and making fun of the bear's mum.
Then came the ultimate insult. Dayne didn't just walk away, he sold his club insignia.
And the Hells Angels are searching for their own nuts, because clearly this gang has lost them. The one immutable law of outlaw motorcycle gang life is the return of all club paraphernalia if you find yourself no longer a member. So when a bloke does this, it's a red rag to a bull. The bull in this instance being the world's biggest bikie gang.
Called the Perth chapter sissies for not collecting their property. Said it felt pathetic.
When Dayne was expelled from the Angels early last year, he didn't just hand his patch in.
I need you to relieve me of duty right now.
He took a dump on the club and called the Perth chapter a bunch of sissies for refusing to come and collect his gang paraphernalia, as is custom. It felt f***ing pathetic, is what he told a court during his gang insignia trial. Not content with publicly slagging the club that expelled him, not content with bragging about beating the crap out of its Perth chapter president, Up Late's favourite walking ink monster / social justice campaigner is now auctioning off all his Hells Angels gear. First reasonable offer takes the lot, he says.
Even after nearly 2 years away from the club, he still commanded attention. The tattoos, the gold, the sheer presence of the man. Hard to miss. But someone else was watching, waiting. At 9:50 p.m., they made their move. It happened fast. A flash of metal in the strobing lights. The bite of steel against flesh, blood spraying into the night air. The blade had found its mark, Dayne's throat.
The Dayne Brajkovich stabbing has commanded all the headlines in the past few days, and that's understandable. It's not every day a tattooed meat axe is brought to his knees in a pool of blood in front of concert goers at Kings Park. But that attack, which is clearly the Hells Angels exacting revenge for his constant trash talking of the gang,
and they just suck.
Lesser men would have dropped right there. But Dayne? He was built differently. The blade missed his jugular by millimeters. Pure luck? Maybe. Or maybe someone up there had other plans for Dayne Brajkovich. The media circus outside Royal Perth Hospital told its own story. Everyone wanted a piece of this one. And why wouldn't they? Detective Senior Sergeant Thompson didn't mince words. A targeted attack, he called it. An in-house issue between the Angels and their former enforcer.
Police believe the notorious bikie was targeted by members of his former gang, the Hells Angels, just after the Ministry of Sound classical music event at Kings Park ended around 9:50 last night.
And the possibility this incident is the result of a retribution issue is certainly an avenue we are investigating.
Simple as that. But in this world, nothing's ever simple. The cops moved fast, raids on Angels properties, 5 arrests, drugs, guns, ammo. The usual haul, but solid evidence linking anyone to Dayne's attack. That was another story entirely. When Dayne finally emerged from the hospital, neck wrapped in bandages, he had something to say. I asked for it, I got it. That's the game. Cold as ice. Typical Dayne. But what game was he really playing? What's next for Dayne Brajkovich? That's the million-dollar question. He says he's done with club life. Just wants to manage his properties, live quiet. But in this world, your past has a way of riding shotgun with your future. The enemies are still out there, watching, waiting. The Angels have a long memory, and forgiveness isn't their strong suit. Dayne knows this better than most. It's why he's always looking over his shoulder, always ready. Will they come for him again? Probably. The real question is when and how. But if there's one thing we know about Dayne Brajkovich, it's that he's a survivor. They've tried to take him down before, more than once. But he's still standing, still breathing, still watching, because in his world, it's never over, not by a long shot. And the next chapter? Well, that's still being written. Keep your eyes on this one, folks. Something tells me we haven't heard the last of Dayne Brajkovich. Not by a long shot.